Welcome to another Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katulka, and with me is none other than the Jewish sage himself, the one, the only, Mr. Steve Herzig. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm disappointed in you.
Why? What'd I do now?
Because you started off our podcast with the wrong tagline.
Oh, welcome to the Friends of Israel's Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katulka, and with me is none other than the Jewish sage himself, the one and only Mr. Steve Herzig.
Now you did it. You're kosher. We got to be kosher.
We got to be kosher. The Friends of Israel's Jew and Gentile podcast. Hey, we're glad that you're with us. We're going to continue our study through the book Paul and Judaism at the end of history. It's going to be a great study. We're looking at 1 Corinthians. But welcome in. A lot going on, Steve. A lot going on. First and foremost, just a fresh reminder, get your free stickers by going to 424-1948. Text us your name and address. We want to send you free stickers. So far, Steve, we have given out how many?
17,000 stickers.
That means somewhere in the world, there are 17,000, hopefully, Israel stickers planted somewhere on a Bible, on a book, on a phone, on a mug,
on a water thing,
whatever,
a thermos.
I hope that those
on
are
a phone,
on a phone, all of it. I pray if you're interested in getting free I Support Israel stickers, standing up against anti-Semitism, praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Text us at 424-1948.
Chris, I was talking to one of our people who have a sticker, put it on their phone. And when asked, I told her, people don't like Israel. And now they see that sticker, they could get angry at you. I admire you for doing that. How do you respond? She said, I don't care.
That's the perfect response.
I said, that is amazing. She said, hey, God supports Israel. I love God. I don't care that they don't like it. I want people to know. And that's the
live and be well.
Yeah, there it is.
That's why we want to give them out, because if you text us with the information first, I want a sticker and your address with your name, and text us at 424-1948. My wife, Alice, will bundle 50 stickers up and send them to you. Now, Chris, I have a question for you. My wife asked me just the other day.
Yeah, boy.
There's a man in Australia, which we sent free stickers. They're free to him, all the way to Australia. And he texted her via Facebook, I think. I don't know how she got the information, but she said, he wants more stickers. He's used them up. So what do? It's a long way to Australia.
Well, we have another awesome person too, Layla, I believe, and she's in Australia, and she wants stickers. So I have her address. We got to add it.
All right. You know what? We'll do it. But in order to do it, just for our 7 listeners, know that when we're shipping free stickers to Australia, help us out on the postage. It's killing us.
All right. Well, again, be sure to send in a text at 424-1948. Hey, today, Steve, we had our chapel today. Wednesdays are Friends of Israel Staff Chapel. And speaking of Australians, we have Australians that tune into our staff chapel because we have Friends of Israel
UK
Australia.
And France and all kinds of
from
Poland.
all Canada. We've got our entire team that tunes in, and we get a chance to open God's Word, oftentimes share about what's going on in the ministry, pray for one another. We spend a lot of time. I love this. We spend a lot of the time that we're together praying over our ministry, over our lives as a team, serving with Friends of Israel. We pray for those that we're ministering to the Jewish community and things of that nature. So I love Staff Chapel, and today you were responsible for speaking.
I spoke today, and
you brought it. You brought it.
Well, that's your opinion. I got excited because I had a Talmudic sentence, Chris, that just got to me. It was just such a perfect thing in the world in which we live.
And the Talmud is a book that's basically written by rabbis.
Exactly. Yeah. And it could get very complex, and they ask the craziest kind of questions, but sometimes they have some really interesting statements.
Yeah, wisdom, insights.
And so, life in general it never stays the same. You talk in your family, things are crazy. Most people with kids still at home, school-age kids, little kids, life is crazy. So here's the statement. Would that life were like the shadow cast by a wall or a tree? Now, that's Alice Herzig. That's what she'd like. The shadow of a wall or a tree never moves. It's there all the time. You see it from the time the sun goes up, and it's a little bit different, but the shadow is there till the sun goes down. And the next day, it's the same thing. It's predictable. It's comfortable. But the Talmudic saying says, but it's not that way. Life is like the shadow of a bird in flight.
Yeah, always on the move.
Always on the move. That's the way life is. I thought that statement really captivates us here at Friends of Israel in general because things are happening in every single department. Life is crazy. Where ministry is such a mobile kind of thing. It's malleable. It changes. Pastors, any pastors of our 7 listeners would be able to tell you, Pastor Neil will tell you, ministry as a pastor is not it's not the same every day. It's not the same every hour.
Yep.
It changes all the time. And so I went to Joshua chapter 1 and Moses. Can you imagine following Moses? You never want to be the guy after the guy.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the guy.
No, I always want to be the guy after the guy after the guy.
That's correct. You don't want to be the guy after the guy. And if you don't believe me, God encouraged Joshua because he was the guy after the guy. And in the first chapter, God tells him 3 different times, be strong and courageous. Why does he? Because the people are accustomed to Moses. They've been with Moses for a long time.
He was the man. He was the big macher.
He
led them out.
He is still the big macher
That's right.
in Judaism. Still, to this day. Joshua is the guy that has to follow him. And when you read that first chapter, it's such an encouragement because God says, I'm going to be with you. I'll be with you. Be strong, be courageous. And then he tells them the way, the energy, how to do that by meditating on his word. The word that was given to Moses.
Yeah.
If you got to Joshua from the beginning, you've just read 5 books of Moses, the Torah. And that's what they had. And he's saying, meditate on that. That's going to be your power. That's where you get it from. And so what does it say? God tells Joshua, Moses, my servant, is dead.
Yeah. Just like that.
And then he says, arise and go.
Isn't that amazing to think about? I love that you put it that way. Moses, my servant, is dead. It's not like there's any fanfare. Nothing. God's like, all right.
One servant down, another to go.
Time to move this thing on.
Move it right on. These people come and people go.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that in God's program, that's the whole crux of it. People come and people go, but God's the same.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have a different servant, but the goal is going to be the same. Hey, the goal with Moses was to get him out of bondage and to get him into the land. Well, due to circumstances, events that happen, the bird flying, the shadow all over the place, Moses didn't turn out to be the guy. It's going to be Joshua. But the goal is the same. Now Moses is out, Joshua is in, but it's the same God, and they're going to move to make it happen. And we read about that in the book of Joshua.
When you're talking about this transition with Moses, it was big for Joshua too, because Joshua was he was brought up by Moses. He was instructed by Moses. Those are big shoes to fill.
He was a slave. He was a soldier. He was a spy. This guy was everything. And now he's the successor.
That's right. And actually, his name means salvation.
It
Yeshua, which is the exact same name of Jesus' real name, is actually Joshua.
Exactly.
And so, if you were walking down the street.
Yeshua in Hebrew. And that when you go to Israel, even here in the States, you'll hear especially Jewish believers using the name Yeshua. And more people are doing that just for the context. But that's right. It's Jesus.
Yep.
It's Yeshua.
Yeshua is Joshua, and they actually changed his name to Jesus so they could separate the Jesus of the New Testament or the Joshua of the New Testament from the Joshua of the Old Testament. But the name means deliverance, salvation, and that's exactly what God did.
It is interesting.
You had an interesting other a quote in your chapel where you talked about the fact that if you're not moving forward in life, you're not even standing still. You're actually moving backwards in some way.
I got that from Warren Wiersbe. Warren Wiersbe gave me this, not personally, but I read it from him. and it says, it's impossible to stand still in Christian life and service, for when you stand still, you immediately start going backward.
Yep.
And it's true. That bird, that shadow of the bird, it keeps moving.
That's right.
And it's moving forward.
You know, that one of the things that you tied this in with, and we don't have much time to talk about this, Steve, but I think you were having a legacy moment for yourself during this chapel, which I absolutely loved, because you've been serving as the vice president, the director of North American Ministries at Friends of Israel for, it's got to be since the mid-90s, right?
1996.
1996. And so, I mean, that's almost 30 years of ministry just in a leadership position here.
Yep.
But then you have been serving for at least how many years before that?
Oh, we were 18 years in Chicago, and we were 2 years in Atlantic City, New Jersey before that.
So in total, how long were you serving?
It'll be 47 years.
So 47 years. You know, you've seen a lot of that bird's shadow moving
That bird's
forward.
been flying all over the place.
That's right. But you kind of you did, as I was listening to you speak during chapel. What you really did, which I thought was amazing, is that you talked about your legacy, what you're leaving behind here at the Friends of Israel. And I thought it was absolutely amazing for you to, as the vice president of North American Ministries, there are so many amazing things that are happening because of your leadership and the way that you've directed and guided and pointed North American Ministries, our department, which is the one that hosts the Jew and Gentile. The Jew and Gentile podcast wouldn't happen unless the Jewish sage was sitting across here and had the vision to make this happen. So maybe share some of the exciting
Well,
things.
first of all, you're giving me too much credit.
You're the big maher.
I'm a sports fan, and here's the deal. In baseball's my favorite. I like them all, but baseball's my favorite. And what happens in baseball is the manager gets way too much credit when they win and way too much blame when they lose. I mean, you only have the players that you have. You have to try to work the roster that you have, and you're given credit for that. And it can be, 5-6 games difference in how you structure your team could make the difference between winning a World Series or not winning a World Series. But any good leader will tell you if they have any success at all, and for me it's the same, it's the staff that you work with. Mm-hmm. If your staff doesn't help you, then you're in trouble, big time trouble. You're only one person. We talked about Moses. Moses was the leader, but wait a minute, one of his people, do you remember the 2 spies? He had 2 spies send 12 people out. 2 came back out of the 12 and said, hey, they're bigger than us, but we're serving God here.
Yep.
So the minority report was, let's go get the land. But the majority report was, I don't know.
I never thought about that.
Then it's up to the leader to decide. You got to make a decision. But you got to have good staff.
I hope this doesn't take us off track, but I never thought about that. That actually Moses was the leader and he listened to the 12 decisions that came back. It was a vote. It was almost like a board
10
vote.
10-2.
10-2. You would think you go, all right, well, forget about it. We're going in. I'm Moses. I saw God walk us through the dry ground when the sea split. He walked us to Sinai. I saw the kavod, the glory of God. He gave the law, the whole shebang. I got it. I know who he is. Oh, you guys don't want to go? Okay, fine. I think that's interesting. I never thought about that.
Joshua was the guy that says, I'm 80 years old. I'm ready to go. Yeah. I'm going to take this land. And you think about it, you're as good as your staff is. And we have great staff through the years. And I was I worked under amazing people, and that makes a difference too. Through the history of Friends of Israel, you have Marvin Rosenthal, who recruited me. Wasn't much a recruitment. Hey, you interested in? Yes.
Because you asked.
I'm all in. I'm all in. Or David Levy, who was so instrumental, and his wife Beverly, so instrumental. I worked under Fred Hartman in North American Ministries, and all learning just like Joshua learned. And that's the way it is with you. I remember hiring you as an intern, and I still remember the report from Ministry Services, which at that time was called data entry. Mm-hmm. And so after you left, I asked, so how did Chris do? They love him. That's what they love him. Can we keep him? He's on the phone. He's talking to all the donors. They want to talk to Chris Katulka. Who is that guy? And that's how it started for you.
It was all the sweetest ladies that worked at the data entry at that time. Sweet old ladies we'd always laugh the whole time and take phone calls and do data entry. I did that for 3 weeks. I loved it.
Yeah, that's right. So you learn on the job. You're already called to the work, but then in the call, it's like you never want to leave.
Yep.
And so, yes, I'm thankful for what the Lord has done.
But tell some of the stats. You know, you're talking about baseball. With baseball, you got stats. And we don't live on numbers when it comes to the Lord. God is, it's more, to me, ministry is people. And so.
Ministry moments. That's I learned from you. Ministry moments. That's what we want.
If a moment is the fact that God gives you an opportunity to share about his kindness, his goodness, his salvation, all of it. And we want those moments because that means you did the work to get there. That's what it means. But the point is that we are able to qualify and quantify the work that God is doing so that we can see the impact that we have. So maybe you can share some of those, Steve.
Sure. I reported right now bridges. We have bridges we've advertised. Encounter sponsors bridges as well. Not Encounter.
FOI Equip.
Equip. You see, I get mixed up myself.
Equip sponsors this podcast.
Equip sponsors this, and it sponsors bridges. And we've had 2 years of bridges, right?
Yeah.
Or almost 2.5 years, maybe?
That's right.
2.5 years, over 200 graduates.
That's right. Bridges is our free 9-week Jewish ministry training opportunity.
And anybody listening here can enroll in Bridges. All you have to do is go to foiequip.org and you could enroll. It's free. It's a 9-week course taught by two of our this is not shtick here. This is real. When we talk about
you're not schmaltzing this one up?
I'm not schmaltzing this up. When we talk about our staff, Bruce Scott leads and is just doing a dynamic job. And so 200 graduates. Encounter, 60 people have gone to New York and gone to the Hasidic 770. And so we have 60 people who've encountered the Jewish community and had the Jewish community really encounter them.
Yep.
We've gone to the Philadelphia synagogue, one of the oldest synagogues in Philadelphia, and have a Shabbat and a Shabbat meal and fellowship and opportunity to talk to the congregation. 60 people so far in just a short period of time. 6,000 people are on our mailing list for Equip. We have some of the finest teachers, and we have people that really, well, right now, we're in the middle of Mike Stallard's teaching, which is just amazing.
Yep. People tuned in from all around the world to hear Dr. Mike Stallard. Our good friend Roland was up until 2 a.m. in the UK listening. What a great guy.
That's right. And we have 1,000 equippers. And look, that's free too. It puts them, if you're an equipper, it gets you everything in one spot and you get all the notes.
Access
to everything in one stopover place. And what do they have to do to become an equipper?
You just sign up at foiequip.org.
And that's it?
Yep. You sign up and boom, you get all the access to all the classes and the notes and the slides and all of it.
That's it. So,
and we have 1,000 people that have said, I want to be a part of that, which is amazing.
Right. And so in our department, things are on the move. That shadow is going all over the place.
Tikva volunteers. We have Tikva volunteers.
We have 100 Tikva volunteers. And I just wrote an article, Chris, that I just sent in on examples of what a Tikva team person using a sticker, we send them 50, but they use just one sticker. We've already talked about it on the podcast, putting it on the back of their phone and it producing a pastor preaching the gospel to a Muslim guy at a phone store.
Who we're going to have on the podcast next week.
Lord willing, next week he'll be on because I had to get the rest of the story. Those old enough to know Paul Harvey, he used to have a program called The Rest of the Story. And he'd lead with some sort of thing and then tell you the story. And then he said, now, the rest of the story. And then he'd fill in a blank and
Yeah.
he'd say, oh, no. Well, that's right, the rest of the story. So I needed the rest of the story. So I called the pastor Brown up, and he gave me the rest of the story.
Oh, that's great. Hey, you know what? I learned a little Hebrew this past week that surprised me. We have the Tikva team. And like you said, we have almost 100 volunteers. And that Tikva team has done almost 5,000 hours of ministry in the last since it started, which was a little more than a year ago. So in 1 year, we've added to 100 volunteers, and they've turned in 5,000 hours of volunteerism. That's ministering in the Jewish community or in their local church. Okay, that's amazing. And you can be a Tikva volunteer. If you're listening and you want to volunteer at Friends of Israel,
You got to go to Bridges.
you got to go through Bridges first, free 9-week training. Go to foiequip.org. Okay, all that to say, I found out something because on Encounter, our group goes to that synagogue in Philadelphia, and it's called Mikveh Israel. Okay, but here's what I found.
Mikveh, tikva.
They're the same word. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
It means hope. And actually, mikveh, the word mikveh, is used in Jeremiah, and it actually means, it says mikveh Israel. It comes from the book of Jeremiah, which means the hope of Israel. And so I didn't realize mikveh and tikveh.
So you want to take a bath? You got hope.
It's got to be.
It's certainly hope for the person next to you after you cleaned yourself off.
That's what the mikveh is. It's a bath that you clean yourself in, but it makes me think, is it the hope? Is it the hope bath? You get in there, you get clean, and you can hope for the best.
That's right. Now, look, a mikveh is a symbolic bath. That is
Ritual cleaning.
That's right. You don't take a shower in it. It's not use the ivory soap. It is you dip your whole body after you've repented or before you get married, some sort of ceremony as you approach the new year and you're repenting, all that. It's to tell yourself, the community, and God that you're serious. You're serious about this. And that's why, as believers, when we come to Christ, you know, there are lots of believers who are not baptized.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily want to be, because a lot of it they don't really understand. They associate it with something that it isn't. What it is saying, Lord, I want to identify with you in your death, your burial, and your resurrection. And believe it or not, I've talked to pastors, you probably have too. In a congregation, there's numbers of believers who, for whatever reason, have not chosen to identify with Christ. It's interesting.
That is very interesting.
We invented the mikveh.
When you invented baptism.
We invented the mikveh, and therefore baptism came out of the mikveh. So the Jews, not the Baptists, if you're Baptist, I'm sorry, I'm glad you immerse. I immerse as well. But we invented baptism.
So baptism historically comes from the mikveh.
Correct.
Because that's exactly what John the Baptist was doing.
He's a baptizer. He's not a Baptist.
That's right. And what he's doing is he's in a stream, which is a mikveh, because you have to have flowing water.
It has to be alive. The water has to be alive,
That's
moving.
Right. So if you're in an actual bath, like when you go to Jerusalem, there are mikvahs.
Yep, lots of them.
But the water trickles in and the water trickles out. That's the whole point.
It's got to be churning in some way.
That's right. So when John's in the Jordan River, that's considered a mikveh. It's moving. That's big time moving.
Yep.
And so it was a mikveh. So when he's dunking people and he's immersing them, John the immerser, when he's immersing them in the water and bringing them back up, technically, to the Jewish people, that's a ritual cleansing that would be taking place.
He wasn't taking 3 little fingers, dipping it in water, and going like this.
That's right.
Hey, boom. No.
That is good. All right. So anyway, that was a little sidetrack. But Steve, I just wanted to let you know I really appreciated your message today.
Well,
it was
thank
great.
you. I'm glad I could do it.
Well, hey, listen, we're going through this book by Matthew Novenson, Paul and Judaism at the End of History. And the reason why this is important is because I think we had mentioned this before. Me personally, I don't believe that Paul converted to Christianity. I believe that Paul became a follower of the Jewish Messiah.
He was doing the natural Jewish thing. Jewish Messiah? I believe in the Jewish Messiah. That's it.
You know, it's really hard. Jewish people, when it comes to a Christian, a Gentile Christian, it's very hard for them to understand how a Jewish person becomes a Christian. And we've talked about this where what did they call you? The
Meshumad, traitor?
No. When that church called you the heaven-bound
heaven-bound Hebrew.
That's right. They'll call you a billion, it's a Jewish, what do they call it? There's a billion different names.
They were called Hebrew Christians, Messianic Jew, Jewish believer, a lot of different things. I always just said I'm a Christian.
The reality, though, is that the most natural of the relationships with Jesus should be the Jewish relationship with Jesus, because Jesus is Jewish. He's coming. He's fulfilling the promises of the Old Testament prophets, or the Hebrew Bible. He was Torah observant. He followed the Torah law, just like Jewish people do. He understood even rabbinic law because he stands up against aspects of the rabbinic law. He understood Pharisee. All this stuff is Jewish stuff. So it's funny because in the Gentile mind, I've seen people go, so wait, Jewish people can be Christians? Yes. Paul did not convert. Paul became a follower of his Messiah, Jesus. And as a result, he went from understanding kind of the rabbinic Judaism, he was a Pharisee of Pharisees, to a understanding that the Messiah has come and the end is near. And that's why this book says Paul and Judaism at the end of history, because what does the New Testament say about the fact? Because Paul was very prophetic. You know, a lot of times I think we try to find the prophetic passages of Paul in the New Testament. The whole thing is prophetic to Paul. The way we live our life today is absolutely dependent on the fact that at any moment, Jesus could come. He always was talking about Jesus' return. So the way he thought, the way he taught, the way he wrote, the way he ministered, the way he went to the Gentile world, all had to do with the fact that I believe Paul knew that Jesus was coming back. And for him, he was coming back very soon.
What I find interesting is Paul went to the Gentiles.
Yeah.
He was trained Jewish. You would think, Peter was the one that ended up going first to the Jewish people, primarily. It was Paul who went to the Gentiles, and he's the Hebrew of the Hebrews.
That's right. And I always look at Paul, I think I've said this to you before, I always look at Paul as the obedient Jonah. You know, Jonah went to the Gentiles. He didn't want to go. He didn't like them.
Oh, he was angry. He was an angry Jewish guy.
He was angry because he knew God would forgive them if they did repent.
And those people were, it's rough. They were just awful.
Awful. And so God was going to judge them because of their awfulness, their sin. And then Jonah goes and he does what God says.
I knew you would forgive them. That made me mad.
And God did forgive them.
Yeah, and in chapter 4, that's what he was mad. I knew you would do this.
Yeah, he says, I knew you were a loving, forgiving God. I knew you would do this. But the point, though, is that when the Gentiles in Nineveh under Jonah repented and turned to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and God relented from sending calamity on them, Jonah didn't go, all right, all you Gentiles, now you have to circumcise yourself, and you have to keep kosher law. They didn't do that. There was none of that. They just repented and believed, and what happened? God relented from his calamity. I think Paul is going into the Gentile world, and he's saying, just like Jonah, but with an obedient heart, because actually Jonah could only be one chapter if he would have obeyed God. The other 3 chapters are Jonah being angry with God or running from God or whatever.
Jonah had shtick to deal with.
He did. He has his own personal issues. 3 chapters are his own personal issues. 1 chapter is obeying God. But the point is that Paul, to me, is the obedient Jonah. He's going in and he's saying, look, you don't have to be circumcised. You don't have to follow kosher laws. That's what the Jewish people do. What I'm telling you is that Jesus is coming back. The judgment is coming. Be saved from and forgiven of your sins. I believe that's what he was doing, and I think that's the way that this is presented as well. But what's happened over time in church history is that the scholars of the Bible have become too Gentile, and what happens is they want to find a way to punish God's chosen people, and so they use a form of interpretation in the Scripture.
And why do they want to punish them? That's the way I was raised, Chris. You're hitting on really a critical thing from a Jewish point of view. This is all Jewish, but if you talk to Jewish people today, they think it's Goyisha, because we've been raised, and history shows that the Christians interpret the Jewish people as the Christ killers, as the ones who believe in false gods, as the ones who are adopting Goyish gods, and all that. And so growing up, I never met a Christian who positively related to the Jewish people. Not until I came in contact with Friends of Israel at 22 years old. I just thought that a Christian was somebody who wasn't Jewish and who believed that Jesus was God and that the Jewish people were responsible for his death.
And that's the thing is that when I say punish, is that they looked at it and said, like you said, oh, these were the ones who rejected the Messiah and crucified the Messiah, and therefore God is punishing them. And you know what? There still has to be an Israel, because the Israel is the people of God. So now we become Israel, and it's called supersessionism or replacement theology. And this guy, this particular theologian, Matthew Novenson, has so far done an excellent work on convincing us of these problem passages that Christians like to use that believe in replacement theology or supersessionism, that they like to gravitate to these to say, see, God is done with the Jewish people. God is reworking them completely and changing everything in Christ. Well, of course, he changed everything, but does it mean that he undid his relationship with the Jewish people, with Israel? And what does all that mean when Paul uses certain language? So this particular section has to do with 1 Corinthians 10:18, and I thought maybe we would read through some of this, Steve.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right, this part is called Consider Israel According to the Flesh, from 1 Corinthians 10:18. He writes, Matthew Novenson writes, it is striking that the passage perhaps most cited in support of a quote-unquote spiritual Israel motif in Paul is one in which Paul says the supposed opposite. Recall Origen's reasoning. Origen is a theologian from the 3rd or 4th century AD.
Yep.
And he says this, the apostle says somewhere, behold Israel according to the flesh, as if there were an Israel according to the spirit. Origen's as if there were is an acknowledgement of a point that should be the first premise of any discussion of the issue. Paul never actually speaks of a quote-unquote true Israel or quote-unquote spiritual Israel.
That's such a great point, Chris, and it's so simple. And that's why, to me, when you read the Bible naturally, and so many of the people associated are donors, people who pray for us, people who love and support the Jewish people, they read the Bible and they don't see an Israel according to the flesh and an Israel according to the spirit. They see what, to me, the text plainly says, there's an Israel. Some of them believe and some of them don't. And there's so much evidence even before Jesus. There's people who believe after they were redeemed from Egypt, but not all Israel believed after they were even redeemed. Moses said, hey, he's talking to Jewish people. Who's on the Lord's side?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are 12 tribes, Chris.
Only one went over.
One tribe. That meant, I picture, hundreds of thousands of these people, 600,000 men, they're standing around. Who's on the Lord's side? I see Jewish guys going, not me.
Yeah.
Are you? Nope, not me. Wait, Benjamin. Nope, nobody in Benjamin. Gad. Nope, nobody in Gad. Hey, Judah. Nope, nobody in Judah. Levi. Yep, we are.
Yeah, Levi was the only one.
Levi was the only one. But there wasn't a spiritual Israel there and a fleshly Israel. There was an Israel, and some believed and some didn't. We call that, now that's different, remnant theology. Mm-hmm. God always has a remnant. You go to a church, Chris, you could go to such and such a church. There's a building and there's a congregation. The assumption might be they all believe. I don't know if that's the correct assumption. I don't know if that's a fact at all.
It's not good.
It just means that people going into the building want to be associated with the church itself, the congregation, the physical gathering. But as to whether they believe or not, that's an individual decision. And it's always been an individual decision. Always.
Yep.
From the time of Adam and Eve, it's an individual eat or don't eat. Oh, well, if you eat, you're not going to die. You're going to be like God. Oh, okay. So now man ate. He believed for a while, and then he disobeyed and had trouble.
That's right. It's Tsurus.
Oh,
well, it says this. It says, never and nowhere was that ever spoken of a true Israel or a spiritual Israel. Never, nowhere. And in fact,
I like
no,
that.
Vincent.
Never and nowhere.
Yeah, I have to say, too, one time I heard N.T. Wright give who's another theologian who actually holds to the premise that the
Quite
church...
popular, too.
Yeah, very popular New Testament, or actually I should just say a biblical theologian. Very brilliant. I'm not putting him down, but I'm saying I disagree with him because he does think that the church has in some way replaced Israel, in a lot of ways, actually, I should say. But the reality is that when you listen to him give a message on Romans chapter 11, has God forsaken his people? May it never be. When it's talking about Israel, he will begin to do jump ropes and all of it.
Because of Kamala Harris, we have word salad. I hear that term now. Word salad.
That's exact. It's word salad to try to make Israel not Israel, and it's amazing how difficult. It will confuse the daylights out of you. But that's exactly what's going on here. Never, nowhere, Novinson says, though. And in fact, the only once does he speak of Israel according to the flesh. That one mention comes from 1 Corinthians 10 in the midst of a discussion of the ethics of consumption of meat sacrificed at Gentile shrines. Paul's point in the immediate context is that eating in a ritual meal makes the person who eats a fellow of or participant with the deities involved. Of the Christ assembly, that's the church, he says that their Thanksgiving meal is a participation with the body and blood of Christ, 1 Corinthians 10:16. We believe that's a remembrance. They're remembering the body and blood of Christ. Of sacred meals in Gentile temples, that's paganism, he says that those who eat and drink the sacrifices are participants with the demons, 1 Corinthians 10:20 through 21. And as with the temple of Demeter in Corinth, so too with the temple of the god in Jerusalem. Consider Israel according to the flesh. Are not those who eat the sacrifices participants with the altar, Paul says. That is, celebrants in the Jerusalem temple too are participants with their deity, not with demons as in Corinth, but with the altar of the one God over all. Israel according to the flesh here just means Israel, the people whose temple is in their metropolis, Jerusalem. Thus, rightly, the RSV, he says, translates it, consider the people Israel. That's interesting.
It's very simple. He explains it. He puts the cookies right so we can get them, Chris, and it explains it really well. But the text goes on to talk about other people, or in this way, Israel corporately according to the flesh. Chris, tell them about individuals according to the flesh.
Yeah, it's interesting. So he goes on, he says, if so, then Origen's inference from this verse, as if there were also an Israel according to the Spirit, is simply a non sequitur. We're getting big here, Steve.
We are in the land of higher up.
That's right.
I graduated in the top 10% of the lower third. I understand, but you're getting close.
That's right. We got a little Latin in here, the non sequitur. The one does not entail the other. If we want to test it as a possible inference, then the most relevant evidence would be other places where Paul singles out particular persons or peoples, according to the flesh, of which there are several, in fact. Jesus, the Son of God, comes from the seed of David according to the flesh, Romans 1:3. Abraham is the patriarch, our forefather, according to the flesh, Romans 4:1. The Israelites, Paul say, are my brothers, my kinfolk, according to the flesh, Romans 9:3. Christ himself comes from Israel according to the flesh, Romans 9:5. Unsurprisingly, there is no interpretive dispute around some of these parallel texts too. But in any case, none of them either states or entails a counterpart according to the Spirit, a spiritual seed of David, a spiritual forefather Abraham, a spiritual Messiah. Daniel Boren, echoing Origen's comments on our verse, Paul here is alluding to his this is big, Steve. Paul here is alluding to his Platonizing doctrine that external...
Tell them what Platonizing is, Chris.
Yeah, we're getting deep here. Plato was a Greek philosopher that believed that the flesh and the things of this earth are all meant to fall apart and be destroyed, which is very true. The flesh does die. The things that we own fall apart. I just threw a couch away because it got beat up and all that kind of stuff. Things fall apart. But in Plato's philosophy, his Greek philosophy, there is a perfect place. There is a perfect location where the perfect couch is that never is destroyed. It's the perfect representation of a couch. It's the perfect representation of a tree. It's this almost heavenly place. And the flesh is bad, but the spirit inside is good. And so that's Platoism.
So he's saying that Paul is Platonizing.
That's right. He's actually saying Paul is thinking like a Greek scholar or a Greek philosopher.
We're going to find that might not be true.
That's right. That's actually a big issue. It's the idea of where, Steve, honestly, where most Christians get the idea of heaven is that we all float off into some cloud and we sit and play our harp and we have a halo and some wings. Like that is the image.
We're Platonizing.
That it's worked its way into the church. If you ask most Christians what's your hope as a believer, I'll tell you my hope according to the Bible. It's not just to go to heaven. Heaven is this distant, ethereal place that nobody knows where it is, but we know it's perfect in some way. That's Plato. From when I read the Bible, heaven is when you resurrect from the ground, just like Jesus did. We identify with his death, it says in Romans, and his resurrection. So we're going to be like Jesus and resurrect from the dead. Do you know what that means? That it's very Jewish, not Plato, not Greek. So anyway, he's saying that what's happening is that Paul here is alluding to his Platonizing doctrine that external realities, things in the flesh, all have spiritual signifieds, which means there's something better somewhere else. But in fact, Paul has no Platonizing doctrine. Origen perhaps does, but not Paul, Steve. That's huge.
That is really huge. And I just love the argument of just doing the opposite. So, seed of David, according to the flesh, there must be a spiritual seed of David. No. Christ, the seed according to the flesh, no, there's no spiritual Christ. He is Christ. Abraham, according to the flesh, so there's a spiritual Abraham? No. Israel, according to the flesh, a spiritual Israel? No.
Yep.
Let's be consistent. And I think it's really important.
This becomes his entire argument that there's always in a lot of New Testament scholarship, and I would even say in a lot in the evangelical church, is this versus Israel mentality. The carnal Israel or the fleshly Israel versus the spiritual Israel. That's why he calls it versus Israel. And because what they're trying to do is separate the two so that now the church can become the Israel, when that's just not true. And I think Novenson does a great job showing us from 1 Corinthians 10:18 from the context that that's not actually what Paul is trying to argue at all. He's arguing, they're just talking about Israel, the people of God who lived in Jerusalem and the temple in Jerusalem and things of that nature.
Now, I know our time is short, but read the last sentence, Chris, starting from in short.
In short, there is nothing about 1 Corinthians 10:18 to suggest that by saying Israel according to the flesh, Paul means to imply that there is some other parallel entity.
I love that.
Yep. A supposed Israel according to the Spirit.
So when we hear Israel, and by the way, I know there's several of our listeners, and I'm glad because Friends of Israel, people get Israel My Glory, and people could get Israel My Glory if you've never heard of that magazine before by going to FOI.org. You can sign up free for Israel My Glory.
And we have the link in the show notes as well for that.
In the show notes.
That's
there
right.
You go.
It's got to scroll to the bottom.
So we just want to make sure that our people, most of them already know a simple reading of Israel. Israel simply means Israel. Some believe, some don't believe. Here at Friends of Israel, when we talk, somebody might say, "Oh, I met a Jewish person." Oh, that's great, and they're a believer. Mm-hmm. Or they might say, "Oh, I met a Jewish person. They're not a believer, but they're still Jewish."
Yeah.
That's the point. It doesn't make it. They're still Jewish, and so we differentiate that, and God has differentiated that almost from the very beginning. People believe and people who don't believe. How did the Gentiles get in? The Gentiles get in because through our blindness, the gospel's preached to the world. We thank God for that. We're equal in every single way, but we are distinguished. There is a physical, natural Israel that God made certain promises to, and that those promises he's never reneged on.
Steve, next week, I just want to, so our people come back. I hope that you come back, our 7 listeners.
They're probably saying, what is that? What are we talking about here with the flesh and the spirit?
The fleshik.
The fleshik.
Well, the big one, it's a big one next week, excuse me. Galatians 6:16, the Israel of God.
Oh, that's a big one.
That's a big one because there's a lot of theologians that like to say, oh, see, here Paul is saying that the church is the Israel of God. Not God's Israel, but the Israel of God. He's making a specific point, and Novison does a great job highlighting the differences that take place that would give us actually a more natural reading that he's talking about Israel actually in that place. All right, Steve, why don't we go to the news? You found some good ones here.
Okay.
And we've got big news, by the way.
Big news. You want to lead with that?
Yeah, let's lead with the big news.
Well, as we speak today, we just found out Hamas said and Israel agreed to a deal. This is a deal. We don't have all the specificities. See, it was in my head, but I couldn't get it out of my mouth. We don't have all the details, I'll tell you that. But it says Hamas said to agree to Gaza deal. PM's office, the Prime Minister's office, says no official word received yet, but it seems as though it's happened.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some return of hostages, and it seems in the deal there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, returned of terrorists back to Gaza.
The Walla news site, which is an Israeli news site, cited an Israeli official saying there is a breakthrough in the hostage deal negotiations in Doha. Hamas militant leader in Gaza, Mohammed Sinwar, different Sinwar than the one that was killed a couple of months ago, gave his okay. Channel 12 quoted an Israeli official saying that there has been a breakthrough and assessed the deal could be signed later in the day. So this is big news coming out of Israel. Steve, you were talking about these hostages that are going to be released and some of the things that are going to, that how hospitals are preparing themselves for these hostages that are going to be coming out of Gaza. Everything from young kids up to adults.
Senior citizens.
Yeah. So maybe there's another news article.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue to another article that I read before I even was aware that there was a deal. Israel has been preparing for their return because of the previous return, which was some 40-some days, I believe, after the October 7th. Well, Chris, what they're finding just from those couple months that they were captive and returned, the physical, emotional, and spiritual problems that came because of their treatment, their lack of food, their held in a room with no light and taken blindfolded to places. What they've done is, according to this article in the Jerusalem Post, it says, step by step, this is how Israeli hospitals are preparing to receive hostages. And Chris, I told you what about a little 4-year-old or 5-year-old who's been captive now for 2 years? He might be more Hamas than Israeli because in his young or her young life, they've been taken away from their parents and now spend 40% of their life or 50% of their life in a different environment under Arabic, maybe some Hebrew, hearing all kinds of things, maybe in isolation. The idea is that Israel has already said that every hostage that comes back, first they're going to have to go to the hospital and be treated. That means they're going to have their own room, their own doctor, their own nurse, and their own psychologist. And they're going to need all these resources to help these individuals who have been mistreated so awful. PTSD would just be one of the things. Malnutrition, untreated disease that they might have, all kinds of terrible things. Israel is preparing for them. And the country itself, we just spoke with Menno Kalisher, who's with Friends of Israel in Israel, and he was telling us the population of Israel deserves to have its hostages back. We need them to be here. It's hurting the country. It's the idea of getting them back. They must get them back. That's That's really where the citizens are. And I realize up in high government, there's the military and the politicians. But I'm telling you, from where the people live, Chris, they want their hostages. They want their family home.
You know, I'm glad that you brought up about Menno, too, because most people don't understand how much of a family the entire nation of Israel is. I mean, the whole state feels like a big family because of the way it's a tiny state. The fact that they're all in the military, serving the military, creates a bond among all of them. They are just even in general, a family-oriented culture. They do everything together as a family. So it's right when he talks about the fact that they have this hole in their country, knowing that in Gaza are, however many hostages are still there and unaware of what their status is.
Yeah, we don't even know how many are alive.
That's right. It's a hole in the Israeli culture, in the Israeli heart. And it really is something to see this family really concerned. And also the other thing, too, is, when we think about hostages and issues like this and with war, it's just so separated from us in our world. It's on the other side of the world. These hostages are being held. Just for some of them, it could be a 20, 30, 40, 50-minute drive from their home. It's not far, knowing that your loved one is just right there, that you could drive there and pick them up and bring them home.
In some cases, it's a half an hour drive, 20-minute drive.
That's exactly right. And so, again, there's that. It's so close to home that there's hostages being held. That the nation, like Menno said, does deserve this moment. And I know that there are a lot of Israelis. They didn't care about what would happen with the war or the outcome of the war, or whatever happens to Hamas. The main focus, the main goal was getting the hostages out. And that was the number one issue for them. And I hope that this releases all the hostages and is a deal to end this situation once for all.
As Menno said, the Hamas knows that if they have one bone of an Israeli, that's their leverage. Because even in death, the Israelis look at their people. They want them home, dead or alive. They want them home, and the hostages is leverage for Hamas.
It says a source close to Hamas said that the initial hostage release would be, quote, in batches, starting with children and women. So we'll see how it plays out as these phases unfold. There was an issue with right there at the end of the negotiations concerning the Philadelphia corridor in southern Gaza, as well as an 800-meter wide strip on Gaza's north and eastern border, according to the BBC. But at the end of the day, Israel refused to budge, and as a result, Hamas, I believe, agreed to the deal. So they wanted
the
to
other deal, and I know we always say we don't talk politics, but as it relates to Israel, we're talking today on Wednesday. On Tuesday, there's going to be an inauguration, and President-elect Trump has already said if there's hostages still when I'm there, they're going to have to pay. And I think that's what really has moved the negotiations, because quite frankly, other countries view this president to be the way he was 4 years ago, as we don't know what this guy's going to do, and that gives him leverage as well.
Big time. And so I think we're going to see that, because what's been quiet is the Hezbollah, the Lebanese and Israeli border has been quiet.
Well, they got most of the leadership.
I know they did, but they got most of the leadership with Gaza or Hamas, and they're still finding ways to create havoc for Israel. It's surprising that they still are able to make negotiations with them. Who's making the negotiation? Who's left of the leadership in Hamas?
I don't know, but I'll tell you that they're much more formative than they are in Hezbollah.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Steve, you got one more here.
I do, and it's an interesting one. This, too, coming from J-Post. Israeli singer and AI entrepreneur dares visualize peace in the Middle East with Taylor Swift. So it caught my eyes. It says, in Block's music video, so there's a music video going around Israel, the hostages return leads to peace in the Middle East. Israel advances to the World Cup, and Taylor Swift performs in Tel Aviv. This is like a dream. And it's captivating Israel. And the music is captivating to them. They love the song. What's the song called? Tov something.
Oh, Sof Tov.
So what's that mean?
A happy ending.
Happy. Everything is. It's like daisies and moonbeams and.
Yep.
But this song has captivated the Israelis because in this song it's make believe. Everything is wonderful. People are at peace. The road is running through Gaza and Syria, and everybody is happy. And it's one of those things that causes you and me to go to some movies. When there's some lighthearted movie where the good guys win, the bad guys lose, everybody's happy. They sing a song at the end, balloons go up, and everybody's joyous. That's what this article is about.
I'm trying to see if I can find the video of Suf Tov, maybe something we can listen to. Or is it Tov Suf, Steve? Which is it?
I have to find. I can't find it.
I can't find it here. Maybe we'll find it and we'll play it next. It kind of reminds me of what's his name song that they usually sing during Christmas, which I never understand it. No, it's not during Christmas. That's a different one. Imagine by
a Beatle guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
By the Beatles, or I forget who.
Here it is. Sof Tov. A happy ending.
Yeah.
Best known for pop songs released over the last 2 decades, Block is also an AI entrepreneur and used video generation tools to make the music video for his new song, Sof Tov.
All right, here we go. He's just playing. Oh, wait, this can't be it. That can't be it.
No, it's got to be more upbeat than that.
That can't be it. That 392 views. There's got to be more views if it made the BBC.
Jerusalem Post.
Oh, Jerusalem Post. I apologize.
Yep.
So anyway, if you find Suf Tov, let us know.
We just found it, so we don't have a lot of information. It's not we don't have a big production team.
No, this is it right here.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, Yiddish word of the day, Steve. Yiddish word of the day.
So, Chris, I decided to say, okay, here we're going through Israel, spiritual Israel, Abraham spiritual, and seed of David spiritual. What do we say it is? Nonsense.
Nonsense.
This is nonsense. So the Yiddish word is really a little phrase called Nekhtiker Tag. Yesterday's day.
What does that even mean?
Yesterday's day. It's as you explain it in Yiddish, the exact translation doesn't make sense. But yesterday's day never happened. It's nonsense.
It doesn't mean anything. It's done. It's not worth anything.
Don't even think about it. And there's another one that is steigt sich nicht an. Steigt sich nicht an is story doesn't have a beginning or an ending.
It's nonsense.
It's nonsense.
And so this whole concept of a spiritual Israel versus a physical or true Israel or whatever the case might be, it's nonsense.
There's Israel, and that's it.
That's right. And that's the best way to read
Israel
the Bible.
Is Israel.
That's exactly.
News item. Israel is Israel.
You don't say. That's true. Huh?
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for being a part of the Jew and Gentile podcast. Please go to foiequip.org. There you can register for your Dr. Mike Stallard's class, if you haven't already, where he's talking about the core principles, the key truths that the Friends of Israel stands on, the biblical foundation, 19 key truths about Israel and about the doctrine that we hold to. You can go to foiequip.org, and there you can register. People from all around the world are tuning in to hear from Dr. Stallard. It's amazing. Be a part of that.
He's got the goods.
He's got the goods. Be sure to text us at 424-444-1948. We want to send you free stickers. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for being a part of the Jew and Gentile podcast. We'll see you next week.